Back everyone to Morning Line. We are talking this morning, as you see, about human sex trafficking. Our guest with us this morning is Margie Quin. She's special agent in charge with the TBI, and among other things that she deals with, the human sex trafficking aspect of this. We just gave a good overview, I think, of just the problem and what it's like here and what the TBI now can do about it. The number is 737-7587 if you have a question or comment about how they handle this. Now, we were talking about an arrest last week. Now, you said that this was an important arrest because it kind of sets a precedent, or going in this direction in terms of the enhancement for human sex trafficking laws. This what's this guy's name? Michael Kohlmeyer was convicted, charged and convicted. He had been trying to contact a minor prostitute, an underage prostitute on the web.
Yes, it's significant for a couple of different reasons. One is the legislature a couple of years ago passed something or enhanced the human trafficking laws to say that a person who purchases sex from a minor or from an adult victim who's maybe been the victim of force, that they can also be prosecuted as a trafficker. So not patronizing prostitution, a misdemeanor, but actually in Michael Kohlmeyer's case, because he was looking for a child not over 8, over 8 but not over 16, he settled on a 12-year-old child. So he was attempting to buy a 12-year-old child for sex.
That's what he wanted. So you've seen the evidence in this. Yes. So he had, the email exchange like we've seen on some of these TV shows where this is what I'm seeking. Right. And how did you nail him on that? Was there a sting operation, or was there something where the emails were enough to arrest
He was
him?
Texting, with an individual. He began texting with somebody that he met on or contacted through Backpage.com, which is one of the largest purveyors of sex advertising. Right. When he revealed what he wanted, that individual he had been talking with said, wow, this is something I've got to take to the police. And so thankfully she contacted Metro Nashville PD, and they began aggressively working the case. TBI got involved because Michael Kohlmeyer actually lives out in West Tennessee. And so we worked the case jointly with Metro PD, but really the credit goes to Metro PD and Assistant District Attorney Antoinette Welch for utilizing these new enhanced statutes to prosecute Michael Kohlmeyer, not for a misdemeanor charge or a lower class felony, but under these enhanced laws as a Class A felony. So
because he goes online trying to get a 12-year-old prostitute, it's not a misdemeanor anymore when he's nailed on it. He's doing what, 20 years?
22 years was his sentence.
The jails are going to fill up with a lot of these guys. I mean, that happens constantly. If this enhancement, where are you going to put everyone? Well, seriously. I mean, you nail him for 20, and that's right. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, that's what he deserves. But I mean, we see all the time. I mean, the child pornography that's out there, the people going online trying to get this. You could arrest someone every single day.
Absolutely, and we do arrest people every day across the state for things like child pornography, solicitation. Now with these new enhanced sex trafficking statutes, I think we can put these folks where they belong and protect children. I think that's the clear message that the General Assembly is sending, is that we are going to protect children in the state of Tennessee. Children are safer now because of the laws that they have passed, and I'm pretty certain that we can find plenty of space in the state penitentiaries and jails for individuals like Michael Kohlmeyer, who seek to exploit the vulnerabilities of children. Yeah.
What were some of the other things that were passed by the legislature that will assist? It's in terms of resources for you as well now?
Right. They this year passed something we think is incredibly significant, which is a mandatory training provision, which means all law enforcement and our state agencies are going to have to receive 2 hours mandated human sex trafficking delivered by the TBI.
All the police departments. I mean, every officer, like here in Metro, will go through this 2-hour training.
And one of the reasons why we asked for that and we got that, I think, is because when we did our original report to the legislature in 2011, one of the, I think, amazing statistics or alarming statistics that we found was that we got about 1,000 responses to our initial survey in 2010, 2011. 94% of law enforcement responded, and 79% of those that responded, 79% of those 1,000 that responded said they didn't think their agencies were adequately trained to even recognize or identify a case of human sex trafficking. So that's an emergency. If our first responders don't even know what it is.
Well, that's why. I mean, I was asking. I didn't know exactly. But okay, so how would you identify it then? I mean, it's pretty clear if you encounter someone like this seeking that out. That's clear cut what he was asking for. But as you talk about law enforcement officers, I was even thinking, could some of these kids be involved in this and be actually attending schools? as well, or is that
Absolutely.
pretty rare? So
No,
teachers maybe, not that, there's the resources to train them as well, to maybe observe some characteristics in a child that may be involved in this.
Teachers, guidance counselors, nurses, emergency room personnel, health departments. We've had a big push this last year to get into the medical and the health officials, because we know that these victims are presenting in places like emergency rooms and health departments to seek care. Little girls and little boys are not built for this sort of victimization.
So they're coming in with what we're talking trauma, sexually transmitted diseases.
Absolutely.
I mean, you see a child of that age with a STD, and you know something's wrong, obviously.
One of the first calls we got to the human trafficking hotline when it was initiated was in March, about 2 years ago, and it was from one of our major hospitals in the state. And a crisis nurse called the hotline at about 11 o'clock one night, and she was transferred to my cell phone. And what she told me was they had a 13-year-old girl in the emergency room who had multiple sexually transmitted diseases. She was in a psychotic episode, and she suspected that she had been sex trafficked. And I said, well, tell me a little bit more. Has she ever presented before? Have you seen this child before? And she said, yes, ma'am. Oh. She presented at 12. With the same symptoms.
So she had been to this hospital before with the...
Right, but I had done a 1-hour training session with that particular health network.
Awesome.
And that video was available, and hundreds and hundreds of the healthcare workers within that health network had watched that video, learned what the signs and signals of sex trafficking were, and so 1 year later when that child presented, somebody recognized that, hey, this is not just child sex abuse, this is actually sex trafficking, and called the hotline.
Now, the first time, I understand what you're saying. You clarified it for them, and they called the hotline. Now, that first time at 12, though, I mean, seeing a child with an STD, wasn't that enough of a red flag for them to investigate her situation?
Well, they report that to the Department of Children's Services, but if the abuse doesn't happen at the hands of a parent or a guardian, then DCS doesn't really have jurisdiction or authorization to to investigate that.
Can DCS contact and call you in?
They can, and they can also contact local law enforcement. But in these early days in 2010, 2011, when the laws were changing, until 2011, the laws were really in conflict. So you had part of the code that said these kids were prostitutes, that they were culpable, and then part of the statute said, no, these kids are human sex trafficking victims. So there was conflict within the code. Law enforcement certainly had no problem recognizing these children as prostitutes and putting them in juvenile detention centers, and that's what was happening.
How long ago was that was happening?
Well,
before the law
our original
changed?
statute came on in
So we had criminalized prostitution for children.
Right. And children were going to juvenile detention centers for prostitution. In 2007 is when our state statute for human sex trafficking came on board. In 2000 is when the United States Congress passed a law outlawing human sex trafficking. So these are relatively new laws.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing right now is an evolution. It's a paradigm shift in the way that we think about and perceive things like human sex trafficking. And that's really important, I think, to understand.
Anyone going back how long, again, I didn't know this, could consider criminalizing prostitution for a minor. That's absurd by definition. Who on earth put that on the books? And apparently it was for years. I mean, that's ridiculous.
So in 2011, when we decriminalized prostitution for minors in the state, we were one of the first 7 states in the nation to do that. So what the General Assembly has done here in our state, it really shouldn't be overlooked. They've been groundbreaking in the ways in which they've crafted the laws that we've put on the books to protect children. In fact, we're number 1, number 2 in the nation. We're kind of trading off and on with Louisiana for the laws that we have on the books to protect kids, which I think is an amazing thing.
I'm just wondering, too, as a big picture, and I know you talk probably all around the country, but you mentioned Louisiana and you mentioned Tennessee. Is this something, though, that is more of a problem in the Southeast? Is it whatever? Is it regional? I know it happens everywhere, but is it one reason that some of these states are leaders is because we have more of an issue here? Or, I don't know, do you think, you suspect? I mean, is it any worse here in the South than it is, say, in the Pacific Northwest, for whatever reason?
I don't think so at all. In fact, the leaders in the nation right now are Louisiana, Tennessee, Washington State, New Jersey. So that's kind of the 4 corners of our country.
Gotcha.
And there are some other states in between, obviously, that are doing a great job on this particular issue. But we've also got states that are doing and have done absolutely nothing. States that have not even passed a human sex trafficking statute. So we're concerned at a national level, I think, about whether or not we're creating destination states. So you hear nationally about these destination countries and travelers that go to certain countries because they can have sex with kids there. Well, have we inadvertently created destination states? So
these men that do this, they're aware of what the laws are in various states. I've heard that. That's
absolutely.
Well, you know, all you can do right now, and hopefully you spread the word, is take care of your own, and we at least make sure that Tennessee's not one of those destinations.
But we're trying. Director Quin, Mark Quin, with the director of the TBI, is on a national council at this point, and we are developing templates and trying to assist other states, encourage other states to do what we've done in Tennessee to make the children safe in their state. Make sure we don't have destination states here in our country.
Let's take a call or two. The number 737-7587. I know it's a heavy topic, but every once in a while someone wants to jump in with a question or comment. We've got Cindy. Hi, Cindy.
Good morning, Dick.
Good morning.
Okay, I kind of want to explain something to her and then get an answer.
Sure.
Okay, you know, back in the early 80s, okay, you know the very most expensive hotels that you can check into, correct? I mean, they're not your cheapy hotels. Okay, so anyway, my question was about this. Now, when I was a bartender for about 35 years. At that time, I was like 23. Now, I would see some 15 and 14-year-old girls that I knew with no way they were 18, because back in those days, you only had to be 18 to get into the bar. All right, then I would notice who their scent was, and I was thinking, man, something's not right. So, but they had the ID. So I would question the security and stuff. And yes, these girls were prostitutes. Very high class ones that got very good money.
But they were young, right?
They used to rob the men up in the hotel room.
Yeah.
And I would tell, look, you know, to the security and to a cop that would come in or something, there's something not right about this one over here. I just don't trust it. You know, is there anything I could do? And you know that I could absolutely not do anything, because he said, well, it seems to check out. I've talked to him. But no, you knew. And you knew when the guy came back that he got robbed and everything. And when he reported the robbery, but see, he had sex with him, you know, and then he got Mickey'd or whatever.
Yeah.
But he did have sex with him. And they said, well, I'm going to have to call your wife. That's what the cops said.
Sure.
I'm going to have to, you know, this is going to go on report stuff. We need your home number. And then the guy would say, well, I'm married. For one, he shouldn't be doing this anyway.
Well, what's your question, though? Go ahead. What's your question about that, Cindy?
Well, then how can you get them to follow through, too, when you report this and they're not doing anything about it?
Okay, yeah, and fair question. I mean, and that was all those years ago. Is that what you're talking about with this training, maybe?
Absolutely.
She was reporting it. It seemed like, you know, they didn't really know how to observe what she thought she was seeing.
Right. I mean, I think when she's talking about the early 80s,
that was a while ago.
You know, 20 years before sex trafficking was even contemplated in the United States.
But it was going on.
It was, certainly.
Absolutely.
This is not a new crime.
Yeah, right.
The way we define it within the code is new, but this is certainly not a new crime.
Okay.
But I think we had this misperception that women and children are choosing this sort of profession, this sort of career, and that's just not the way it happens.
Of course not. All right, listen, we'll take a break, because when we come back, I want to follow up a little, and we'll take more calls, but about then what you think will be different if she was a bartender today and saw that, where she should go and who she should talk to. And we'll continue our conversation right after this. Stay with us. Yeah, that's interesting.